What's going on, everybody? This is Moose and Brian here from OccupyFantasy.com, at OccupyFantasy on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I am your host, Moose, at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. Co-founder and data guru here at OccupyFantasy, alongside Brian at BrianJesterFF on Twitter. He is the co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy. How's it going, Brian?
Moose, what's up, dude? Week 6. We're here. Bye weeks are here. It's when I feel like this is when we start to thrive. Bye weeks, underperforming wide receivers. So feeling good despite being shell shocked from last week. Still suffering from PTSD from some of the outcomes last week. But yeah, after that great Thursday night game, ready to roll it into the main slate.
Absolutely. And we're here an hour early because I have a donut festival I have to go to, which might be one of the more like sickos meme ever. I'm missing UFC for donuts, but hey,
I'm pretty jealous, actually. I mean, it sounds great.
Definitely. But this is not the they do not have donut festivals on the DraftKings, so we're going to have to talk about NFL for the next 30 minutes. So if you all have questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. If you just want to say hello, you can do that as well. Or if you don't, you just want to watch, totally fine. So let's kick it off. Brian, I'll start it off with this. This was the most recent news that's happened since the last hour or so happened, where Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor are both ruled out. That leaves Deion Jackson, Phillip Lindsay. Both are relatively cheap on DraftKings. I think 47 something and 5,200. Are they even good enough to play? I mean, we talked about it right before. It seems like there'll be a split backfield, is what they did last week. Do we try and take a stand with any of them, or do we just kind of just go somewhere else this week?
Yeah, I think I was posting in Discord a little bit about this before we went live, and I really don't think there's a need, because if this was a normal week where pricing was good, which maybe is not the normal anymore, the pricing's been bad every week, but if it was a week where pricing is regular and we don't have any value running backs, yeah, we would consider that. And, it's tough to get up to some of the high-end guys, maybe we would consider, but we have, on DraftKings especially, $4,600 Benjamin, we have $5,100 Darrell Henderson, we have $6K Ramondre Stevenson, we have $5,400 Kenneth Walker. Like, we have all these guys that you could easily play. So on one of the worst offenses in the league, split backfield, there's no need to go there when we have actual good offenses with workhorses at the same prices. So I guess if you want to try to get crazy, maybe, but I just really don't think there's a need to do that.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Sounds pretty reasonable to me. And but yeah, so we talked about that. Let's jump into it. We normally talk about some stacks, and if no one has any questions, we'll just jump right into that. What you see on screen here is the Occupy Fantasy Daily Plug, which is available at occupyfantasy.com/NFL Daily Plug. We'll talk about some stacks. The first stack that Chris has mentioned in the plug, I'm sure this seems like everyone's on everyone's radar, but is that Arizona-Seattle game is the stack of the week. Brian, talk to me about them.
Yeah, even people who don't play DFS are giving advice that you should play this game in DFS. Like, that's how well-known and popular this game is. And if you just look at the pricing, it's just egregious across the board, right? So obviously we talked about Benjamin. James Conner is out. Darrell Williams is out. So it leaves Benjamin, who's looked good every time he's touched the ball in the NFL. I know our guy Lucas has been craving some Benjamin touches since he got into the league, so this is his week. And you look at the prices, right? So Marquise Brown on the Arizona side is priced regularly, $7,200. Rondale Morris, too cheap, $4,200. DK Metcalf, probably a little too cheap, $6,800. Tyler Lockett, for some reason, $5,600 on DK, the exact same price he was last week after scoring 30 points. And Seattle's throwing a lot. Gino's been incredibly efficient. You also have Zach Ertz at $4,900. You have Kenneth Walker, workhorse running back since Rashad Penny went down last week. So everybody in this game is pretty much too cheap for one of the two games on the slate that's a 51-point total, right? Only two games are above 50. The next closest is 46. And it's very clear between this and the KC and Buffalo game. So, yeah, it's a clear stack. The biggest question, and we'll answer this here in a second after we talk about the Buffalo stack, but the biggest question this week is, how do you get around this chalk, which is mostly pretty good, just because it's bad pricing. It's not like people are gravitating towards these plays because it's great matchups and the pricing is normal. No, all the pricing is really bad, and these guys should be owned where they should be. It's just how do they fail and which ones do they fail?
Exactly, yeah. And as Sean points out, he says on DraftKings, I've tried 3-1 stacking Allen, Diggs, Davis with Kelsey. Even with a cheap running back, it feels impossible without massive punts. That's another stack that's written up in the plug is that Buffalo and Kansas City game. So Brian, if you're trying to do all those studs, where do you think you can kind of pivot to without going to a massive punt?
Well, that goes to the Curtis Samuel theory. And this is when it starts to take effect once we get these bye weeks. Only 10 games on the slate. Remember, every other game so far this year has had 11 or more games, mostly 12 games, sometimes 13 games. Can you pull up the strategy guide really quickly, the NFL strategy guide, and just bring up the Curtis Samuel section, and we can talk about that. Because I think that's the perfect game for it, where the Arizona game, everybody's priced poorly. Everyone's priced pretty normally for the Kansas City and Buffalo game.
Yeah. Really quick, while I am pulling that up, I want to say thank you to our social media guy, Derek, for making this awesome graphic. So go check out the free NFL strategy guide. Throwing that up on screen here for a second. And if we look for, let's see, where is the Curtis Samuel theory? Here we go. The Curtis Samuel theory. And this all stemmed from Curtis Samuel. Who else? So,
Go figure.
Yeah, so basically is for larger contests, think big GPPs, one piece from our game stack should be a cheap player. The theory here is that in order to create an NFL DFS lineup, you do need some value plays somewhere. You've already identified a high ceiling situation, aka your game stack. So instead of playing a value play from another game and hoping for an outlier performance as a one-off, you play a cheap player from your game stack, and if it blows up as expected, your cheap player is sure to benefit.
Yep, that sums it up perfectly. And yeah, because you look at the Buffalo Kansas City game, you have Diggs 8,400, Gabe Davis 6,500, Kelsey is, I don't know what Kelsey is off the top of my head, but he's expensive, right? So if you're trying to play all those guys, it's really tough. But the nice thing is both these teams pass over expectation. These teams pass near the goal line, and they get a lot of guys on the field. So we got Isaiah McKenzie coming back this week. He's 5K after suffering the concussion last week, and he's actually going overlooked. He's only 3% owned, right? Everyone's going to play Diggs. Even Gabe Davis is still only 7% projected by us, right? So you 3-1 stack if you can. But McKenzie, I think, is the key on the Buffalo side. With Jamison Crowder out, we saw what Shakir did last week. 17 DraftKings points, full-time slot role. That's going to be McKenzie this week. That's who they tabbed for that role before he got hurt. So McKenzie, full-time slot role at 3% owned and helps you fit in other pieces. That's the key. And then you look at the Kansas City side, most of their passing offense has gone through Kelsey. We saw the 4 touchdowns on 20-something yards last week. But all the receivers are affordable. Juju, 5,200, is an underperforming wide receiver. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 4,500. Even Mecole Hardman plays a decent amount, 4K, can catch a long touchdown. So I think playing a cheap player in that stack, the Curtis Samuel theory, let's bring it out for this Kansas City game. That's how you play that stack. It also gets you incredibly different on a chalky week. So I think that's one of the best. That's way number one most to circumvent the chalk this week.
Definitely. And I was actually looking at our model here, our model up here on the other screen. And with Kelsey being 7,800, the most expensive tight end on the slate by a wide margin, I mean, Brian, do you think it could even be if you wanted to punt that position, could you go down to Dawson Knox at 3,400, save $4,000, $4,400, upgrade somewhere else so you do have studs on one side? And
punting the tight end position is a great part of the Curtis Samuel game stack theory, right? You get rid of that position that's normally terrible. You hope Kelsey's bottled up. You hope Andrews doesn't go for 40, right? And he scores 8 to 12 points, and if he gets more, then you're eternally grateful. But if not, that's enough to get you what you need. So yeah, I like that idea too, Moose. That's a really good idea.
Definitely. And since we're on the topic of that, David said for the Buffalo Kansas City stack, for smaller contests, does it make sense to go 3-2 mega game stack that game?
Yeah, this is what we talked about on Tuesday, last Saturday, these mega game stacks. That's way number 2 to circumvent this chalk. So thanks for the alley-oop there, David. So people are going to play the chalk pieces. But as we saw last week, even when there are chalky stacks, people don't stack them, these mega stacks in small field like we talked about. So like my 4-0 Bill stack last week, I was the only person with the 4-0 stack, or 4-1 stack even. Gabe Davis was only 4%. Shakir was, I think, 15%. Running back on the other side, Deontay Johnson was 1%. So you play 4 or 5, play 5 or more guys from the same game. Especially now, there's only 10 games, most even more reason to do it. I think the Arizona-Seattle game is more favorable for this because of the pricing. But yeah, if you play Josh Allen, Diggs, Davis, McKenzie, Kelsey, no one's going to do that. You play Josh Allen, Diggs, McKenzie, Kelsey, Juju, right? Like some 5-man combination. No one's going to do that. And there's some chalky pieces in there, but it eliminates the kind of chalk outcome because no one's playing that specific type of lineup. And again, that's for small field only.
Yeah, exactly. And then Ed says, let's talk 3-0 Cincinnati and Buck stacks. He read the plug because that's our only two remaining stacks left. Excuse me. It says, outside of maybe a Deontay, I don't really see the need for a run back. Although I did build a Taysom, Kamara, Chase 2x1. Morris, not Knox. So, yeah, let's talk about that. The first one, Cincinnati. I mean, you don't have to tell me anything to not go Cincinnati, but what do you think?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we're not going to know about T. Higgins. Maybe we'll know here at 4 o'clock when they have to call up somebody from the practice squad. But he didn't practice until Friday, and he was limited. I think he doesn't play. And if that's the case, we can stack Burrow, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase. And if you're building like hand-building single entries, yeah, I think that's great. You can run it back with Kamara. On FanDuel, you can actually run it back with Taysom Hill, Olave if he plays. But it's kind of tough because, without Higgins, there's not many 3-0 combinations that you're looking to, right? Hurst maybe, but like it's just not a ton of combinations for 150 max. And you want to play small field or you want to play a couple lineups with it, I get it. But for me, Moose, I don't know about you. It feels hard to get, okay, I'm going to allocate 10, 15% of my lineups to these Joe Burrow stacks, but they all just kind of look the same. So I don't know what the benefit is there or how you even, diversify those types of stacks.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, because you figure outside of the ones you just mentioned, unless if you just went and said, hey, I'm going 5% of lineups, Burrow, Boyd, Chase, and then you just do the other, you throw away, you do maybe 5 lineups with Kamara from FanDuel, 5 lineups with Taysom Hill, maybe 5 lineups with Olave, and kind of then spin it around with other players. We talked about that before, Brian, where 2 different ways. You can go heavy on a stack and loose and like move around a bunch of different players, or have a handful of different stacks and rotate a core of players around. I think maybe that could be a case where you have basically the same stack, hope the game script goes off that way, and then maybe your one-off pieces can one of those 10, 20 players or whatever that you pick in that subsection goes off.
Yeah, that's actually probably a good idea too. And the reason we like that stack, especially, the game total is only 43 points. New Orleans plays super slow. Cincinnati actually plays super slow too. But it's really just Marshawn Lattimore is out, best cornerback for New Orleans. Chase is an underperforming wide receiver. T. Higgins is out. We get the ultimate scenario that we asked for: underperforming wide receiver with his teammate out versus a backup cornerback. So
yes.
maybe you just play Chase, right? And maybe you just play Chase, and maybe you mini stack it and you run it back Olave or Kamara or whatever. That's fine too. But Chase is an ultimate play this week. He's got the trifecta: underperforming, teammate out, opposing cornerback down. These are the situations we asked for, Moose. So let's hammer Jamar Chase.
Yep, and let's knock out some of these questions here. Dot Bets, which if you haven't seen his video on our channel, please go watch it right after this. Hit the thumbs up. He's doing some awesome work on NFL betting, so go ahead and check that out. Cameron said, I probably should have answered his question instead of just shouting them out. Dot Bets says flex running back and high risk this week.
Yes, we definitely can. It helps with a lot of lineup constructions. And if you remember earlier this year, we talked about only flexing wide receiver, but we have these way underpriced running backs. Yeah, you can flex them. So Kenneth Walker, Darrell Henderson, Ramondre Stevenson. Yeah, flex those guys for sure. And, if you're playing 3 running backs, but those 4 guys aren't in that mix, then I wouldn't flex a running back. You know what I'm saying, right? Like I wouldn't flex like Barkley, Mixon, McCaffrey, or something like that. But if you're playing a combination of those backs, yeah, flex them.
Makes sense.
Or allow them to be flexed is the better way to put that.
Okay. Cameron says, should I trade Jacoby for Dylan?
Jacoby Myers for AJ Dillon. His snap share is scaring me. I'll stick with Jacoby Myers, who's been a great player so far. So I'll say no, just hold on to Jacoby.
And then Kiki asks, should I try and trade Dalvin Cook for someone for Jamar Chase?
If you can get it done before tomorrow, because that blow-up game's coming tomorrow for Jamar Chase. And where's the Fat Joe gif? Yesterday's price is not today's price on Monday. So if you're going to do it today or early tomorrow morning, because I feel like Monday that asking price is going to go up.
Yeah. Thoughts on Jags D with the Colts backfield news?
Jags D is a good play anyways, because the Colts offense is atrocious, regardless if I'm playing running back or Jonathan Taylor's playing running back.
And Brian, this question, you and I were actually talking about it midweek. Why does the model hate Saquon every week?
Yeah, it's a great question. His floor and ceiling is super high all the time, right? But I was looking through it, just trying to figure out why, because I was also thinking, it's like, how can we justify this to people who paid money for the model, right? Like I understand it. I totally understand the concern.
Yeah.
And it's really just a lot of factors of he's relying on big plays. Yes, his volume is huge, but he's gonna have to get some big plays in this terrible offense. And yes, he gets them. He looks healthy, and I think as the season goes on, it'll take more of this 2022 data and not his past couple years data where he's been not that efficient. I don't know, man. It's a lot of combinations of things. It's mostly the offense itself is not great, and it's asking a lot for running backs to continue to do that every single week. Can Barkley do it? Probably. Would I include him in my player pool still? Yes, because he's shown huge upside and a great floor and ceiling combination. Will he be a GPP winner? That's the biggest question. That's what the model's trying to answer. The model's thinking he won't be, especially with all these other guys on the slate every week. So, and really, he's only been a GPP winner once out of 6 weeks. It was week 1. So, you know, I don't think the model's too far off in thinking that way, but I understand the concern when you look at that and you see that and you're trying to answer that question.
But he's a fantastic low risk play. If we go into the model and we do check the low risk filter, there's only 4 running backs that show up: Eno, Leonard Fournette, Ramondre Stevenson, and Saquon Barkley. I mean, in low risk, if you can get someone, he's projected for 30 plus weighted opportunities, you definitely get him in your low risk lineup.
For sure.
Yeah. Sean says, which one of these underpriced running backs are you least confident in? Is there a trap?
Yeah, that's a question I think JR had in the chat. I think it's a question everybody has to answer because there are four clear ones, and you can't play all 4 in the same lineup, unfortunately. So I would think so. Just real quick, Moose, if we look from top down the model, Eno Benjamin, I think is one of the safest because of his price also. But fast-paced offense, no one to compete with touches, plays well in the passing game, has been honestly one of their best running backs. So Eno, I think, is pretty safe. Darrell Henderson's probably pretty tricky just because they do have Malcolm Brown. And Sean McVay is known to do some fuckery with the running back situation. So I think D. Henderson's probably the least safe. Stevenson, no one, assuming Damian Harris is out, he's an easy play. And then the other one is Kenneth Walker, which I guess is probably right there with D. Henderson as far as concerning with, you know, maybe because right up there with Sean McVay is Pete Carroll with running back fuckery. So, like, DJ Dallas could get random amount of work. So I think Walker and Henderson are the least safe of the group. They're all great plays, but I feel the most confident in Eno and Stevenson.
Definitely. Makes pretty good sense there. And, Brian, I did want to actually ask you about, you know, we talked about some stacks. There was a stack that kind of pops up in my rankings, which is kind of gross stack. I know a few weeks ago I mentioned the Washington stack that barely got me on the cash line on the big GPP, so I can't complain there. And as gross as it sounds, I'm trying to justify it, and I want your opinion. Is the San Francisco side, not necessarily the Atlanta side, but the San Francisco side, maybe run it back. I mean, maybe Atlanta, but you figure you have middle of the model quarterback, top 2 and running back, tight end, Jeff Wilson, George Kittle. You have a handful of wide receivers. You have the underperforming tight end that you could potentially run it back with. Seems like there's a lot of pieces there. And with cheap running backs, put in Eno. Then maybe you fit in the giant stud. Then maybe you do go full-blown Kupp, Jefferson, Diggs, 3 wide receivers that way. Is that too sneaky, or is that what's your thought?
I think it's too sneaky playing the quarterback. Like playing Mariota or playing Garoppolo is too sneaky, especially the Garoppolo side, because he hasn't shown a ceiling above 20 points. I think you're going to need 20 points or more from your quarterback on this week. It's not like that one week where we couldn't identify a game stack. We can identify it this week. I think what you're better off doing is either mini stacking 1 by 1 or even 2 by 1, right? Wilson, Kittle, running back with London or something. No one's going to do that. I think you can still upgrade your quarterback position that way and play a stack with your quarterback. I think that's probably the better move than fully stacking that game.
Makes sense. Makes sense to me. Cool. Yeah, and that's why we do these shows, so I can basically tell you to build my lineup. Let's see here. Ed says Colts win 29-17. Deion Jackson 2 touchdowns.
And still not optimal. Hate to see it.
Kiki says a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I mean, if you can get Jamar Chase, then get Jamar Chase. So.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot. This is a DFS show, and I happily will help with season-long questions. But Pittman, Sutton, Godwin, Olave.
Yeah, I think he's trying to justify I think he's trying to justify his trade for Jamar Chase. Right?
Yeah. Again, if you could do it today, go for it. Because if not, that price goes up.
And 7-ish says Ayuk, Garrett Wilson, or Alex Pierce for flex.
Is that season long 7-ish? And if so, what's the scoring system?
And Thing Green says, is Chase going to get steamed? I can't see his ownership staying that low. What is he right now? What, 8%, 8 to 10%?
Maybe he goes a little higher if T. Higgins is officially ruled out. But people are going to want to play Cup. They're going to want to play Diggs. They're going to want to play who else? I mean, there's only so many wide receiver spots you can play. And I think Chase is kind of in a weird spot that most people won't play him because you can play Marquise Brown a little bit cheaper in-game stacks. Yeah, I think Chase stays around the 10% mark. Maybe he goes a little higher, but we've seen it most, right? Like, people don't account for injuries as much. Ownership doesn't pick it up. We thought that Miami game in week 2 might get steamed. It didn't. So, yeah, I think we're safe there. Speaking of which, we have to talk about, before we get to the rest of these questions, the Tampa Bay stack and the defensive injuries that they're facing. It's crazy.
Yes.
So
you can go ahead and say that.
Okay, so Tampa Bay versus Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is without cornerbacks: Cameron Sutton, Ahkello Witherspoon, Levi Wallace. That's their top 3 cornerbacks. They're all out against Tom Brady and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Oh, by the way, they're also missing one of the best defensive players in the league, Minkah Fitzpatrick. Roams all over the field, plays all over, has been dominant since he was traded to Pittsburgh. He's out too. Top 3 corners plus their best defensive player. Not to mention, they're still without TJ Watt, their best pass rusher. He's still out for a while with his chest injury. So they're missing 5 key defensive players against Tom Brady, one of the most pass-heavy offense in the league, with clear passing trees with Julio out. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Russell Gage. So, I mean, this is way number 3 that you evade the chalk moves, is if you stack up Tampa Bay. If you want to run it back, you can. You don't have to. The spread is now up to 10. The total's up. Betting markets see that, they're going to have a tough time stopping Tom Brady without all these guys on the field. So Brady, Evans, Godwin sacks, Brady, Evans, Gage, Brady, Evans, Godwin, whoever you want to do. If you want to run him back, you can. Don't have to. But that moves, I think that's way number 3 that we evade this Arizona, Seattle, Buffalo, Kansas City chalk.
I could even see this being a mega stack. It would not surprise me if Tuesday we go on the $1 million mission and see that a mega stack Tampa Bay mega stack wins the milli. Would not surprise me.
Yeah, throwing Fournette, right? 4-0 stack, right? Because he caught 10 passes last week. So, yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. It's probably my favorite stack. If I played single entry, I think that would be my stack I would go with over those other ones.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit it on the head there. Play those guys. Tom Brady's number 1 in the quarterback model. Brian, I would say our quarterback model has the highest correlation of who's how good it is. Tom Brady's up there by a wide margin. Please go play him. Yes. Cool. So we have 7 minutes left. Let's knock out these last questions. We do have a hard stop at 2:00, so I can eat some donuts. David says, better tournament play, Juju or MVS?
So Juju has lower ownership and is the underperforming wide receiver. So I think that answers the question for me.
.bet says, Disley or Fant, which tight end would you prefer in high risk?
.bets, dude. Oh my God, man. What kind of question is this? Good Lord, dude. I guess, Jesus Christ.
Would you say Fant? Because maybe you just say fuck it and throw him in the mega stack.
Yeah, well, that's what I think he's trying to figure out. which of these two guys. I'll look at routes. I'll take a second. I'll look at routes and targets and stuff because I haven't even considered it. So give me a second to answer that question.
Okay. And the only one is best worst and worst best.
All right, let's see. Noah Fant 20 routes last week. Disley 15. I mean, probably Fant, even though this is going to catch 1 touchdown on 1 target. So I would say Fant if you had to pick one.
Yeah.
Best worst and worst best.
Yes.
All right.
Do you think we kind of answer that? Maybe like Darrell Henderson has a chance to fail.
Yeah, I guess he's probably the worst best, but even then, that's. I mean, again, we're trying to find very minor flaws here. Eno, Ramondre, Darrell, Ken Walker, all very, 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 very good plays. Well, wide receiver. Let me see the highest on wide receiver is. Even then, it's like, I don't know. Chalk is pretty chalky for a reason. So I guess is Tyler Lockett, right? Is probably the best worst play or worst best play, and we're not big on defensive stuff, but if we're looking for reasons to fade this guy who they refuse to change his price. So he and DK Metcalf have been just like destroying man defenses all year.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, the opposing defenses continue to play man against Seattle. And Geno just, okay, you're going to give me man against DK and Tyler Lockett, I'll just shred you guys.
Yeah.
But as Mike Clay from ESPN pointed out in some tweets this week, Arizona plays zone most of the time, and one of their better corners is going to be near Tyler Lockett most of the time. So if they're playing zone, there's a big difference. If we're looking for reasons why they stop fucking scoring 40 points a game, maybe it's because a team is actually playing zone against them this week. So if that's the case, 23% Tyler Lockett is probably the worst best play if that comes into fruition. Now watch Arizona go play more man for some reason this week.
Either that or they're going to play short zone and Tyler Lockett's just going to run past them. Like,
That too.
Yeah. Cool. So for the last 5 minutes, Brian, you normally do this. Let's take a look at. I'm going to bring the wide receiver model up here, and
did we hit it last week? I can't remember.
I don't even. I'll say yes.
Okay.
So
check us.
under 10%, under 6,000 on DraftKings.
Okay.
Yeah, so under 10%. I mean, seems kind of obvious. Say maybe Juju, but I don't know if that's kind of cheating since it's underperformer.
Is it? I don't know. It's part of the process. So Juju, Deontay Johnson's apparently never going to score a touchdown. Kirk's at 10%, so under 10%. I'll say Adam Thielen at 2%. I actually like that game too. I wish Teddy or Tua was starting in that game because I would stack that game for sure. But I think it could be lower scoring than expected. But Adam Thielen's due to get in the end zone, so I'll say Thielen.
Yeah, I did say I like that San Francisco side. I'm gonna say Brandon Ayuk, 5,400, 4% on FanDuel, 3% on DraftKings. You can get there.
Okay, I like it.
Perfect. So, with just a couple minutes left, if you all have any questions, Brian, any last comments, concerns, questions, or anything, as I show up with the NFL strategy guide.
The other question in the chat is about mini stacking these popular games outside of if you stack Tampa Bay or some other stack. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you want to get exposure to the 50-point games for sure. But also I think there are ways that they don't get there too, right? Because if you play the cheaper running backs, which I think are very solid plays, you play those guys, that allows you to pay up for someone like Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Mark Andrews, guys that aren't in these high total game environments, but their target shares are crazy. So I don't think it's a requirement to play a Kansas City Buffalo mini stack, a Seattle Arizona mini stack. Just because these cheaper running backs, if you play a little bit cheaper stacks, do allow you to pay for some of these target hogs, these crazy weighted opportunity receivers. Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek even. Marquise Brown's in that game, obviously, but Drake London, Michael Pittman, these types of guys. I think that's because I think it would shock people if there were no Cardinals, Seahawks, Chiefs, Bills receivers in the winning lineup. But I can see how I can get there if these other guys go off in addition to the low price running backs and this Tom Brady or this Joe Burrow stack goes off, because I think that's how it would happen.
Yeah, it definitely could get priced out that way, and the more we talk about it, Brian, I'm very curious what the winning lineups are going to be this week.
It's going to be a fucking cash game, and I'll tilt again. But I don't know. I think there are ways that it fails. Just with the cheap running backs open up a lot of different constructions that are different. So I'll just say this. We'll close out this way, right? Just remember that most people are going to build these stacks that we've talked about. Your three ways around them are mega stacking them, just like overstacking them and hope all the production comes from those games. You play a different stack like Tom Brady, Joe Burrow. If you like Minnesota, you like San Francisco, like Moose said, whatever it is, right? Play that stack and get different. Or, these other ways is you fade those games and you pay up for Cooper Kupp, you pay up for Justin Jefferson, you pay up for Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Mark Andrews, because that's a construction most people won't do this week. And has a pretty high ceiling because of some of the other cheaper options that help you do it. So that's the thing. I think Moose just, if you're using the builder, just put in a rule of min 2 guys under 10% ownership, and that should accomplish most of the things you're looking to accomplish. Most weeks we don't have to force that, but I think this week, the past couple of weeks, with chalk being as chalky as it is, I think we do have to force something like that.
Yeah, and then if you're hand building just a couple of lineups, I will say take a step back and say, how does this lineup get there in this contest, and what else has to happen outside of it? If you have a super chalky stack and you're like, okay, well, how does this still get there? Just tell yourself the story of how it gets there, and if it doesn't make sense or you really have to stretch far to get that, maybe it's not the right lineup for that contest.
Yes, exactly. And I'll say one more thing as we get out of here. I got second place in most of the contests last week, which I think most people take second place, right, with the Bills mega stack. I'm certainly happy with it. But if you mega stack small field and you think, oh my God, this isn't chalky enough, the chalk's going to beat me, the chalk's too good. Listen, I would have gotten first place by 20 points last week if just any of these things happen. If Dallas defense doesn't score 23, if Lockett doesn't score 30, if Fournette doesn't score 30, if just one of those things happen, right, then we're in the clear, we're winning all the money. That's the same thing this week. We just need one of these guys. As long as all 4, all 6, all 8, all 10 don't go off, you got a chance. You got a chance. So just keep that in mind. I know it seems impossible for the chalk not to fail this week, but it can and it will. And when that happens, those will be the weeks that we absolutely crush them.
I can't say anything else to add on to that. So I'm just going to go ahead and end the show. Again, we'll have the live Q&A on our Discord tomorrow. And then Brian and I will be back on Tuesday to discuss how he did in his 150 max, small field, and his ticket hunts for live finals. Until next time, Moose and Brian from OccupyFantasy.com. Have a good day.
Look.